And there was lots of talk about flooding in several communities. So my dad's brother and his wife brought their 4 children to our house to be safe.
I was 9 years old. I just turned 9 in December of that year. And I remember it quite well because it rained all week. It was really cold. And that morning, it was Saturday morning, and, you know, kids were all wanting it to snow, so we was hoping for snow, but just wet and mucky.
It had rained for 2 or 3 days. I mean, it just poured the rain. So whenever I had gotten home, it was early, probably around 3 o'clock in the morning. I can remember Dad waking me up about 6 and saying, we got to move the cars across the creek. Where we lived on Rome Creek was just over the mountain from Buffalo Creek. So whenever it rained on Buffalo Creek, it rained where we were at. So we had heavy rains and the creeks were swollen. And I got up, we moved the cars across the creek, and that was probably around 6, 7 o'clock.
My dad was a new employee for the Sino Railroad. At that stage, he initially started out in the car department. He went to transportation as a brakeman, so he had very little seniority. When the incident actually occurred, he was at what is now the fan coal loadout in Ammersdale on Buffalo Creek.
My brothers also had a friend to spend the night. It was a Jude boy from Cartwright Branch. And so there were 9 kids in a 2-bedroom house. So we had kids everywhere. The boys claimed the bedroom, the girls fixed sleeping pads in the living room, and just a whole lot of fun the evening before the flood.
My dad worked in the mine, which was up above where the actual dam broke. So he worked 2 hours. So he didn't get home till like maybe 8 or 9 in the mornings. Well, that particular morning, my mother got up. She was fixing breakfast for everybody, and she had the radio on. So that's where she heard it at.
I was only 3, just turned 3. Dad, it was Saturday morning. Dad was heading down towards Lincoln County, whatever, got down 3 Mile Curve. And this is just what Mom and Dad told me. He turned around and came back home because, you know, he'd heard something was going on.
The name of his engineer was Red Pop Hale. Guy that lived at West Logan. And he looked at Red Pop, he said, I know we're making money. He said, but my boots are full of water, and that was just from the rain. He said, we need to get this back to the yard at Peach Creek. So they did their last connections, they loaded up, and as it actually turns out, they were at the mouth of Buffalo Creek at Man when the dam broke.
And I remember hearing my dad, and he wasn't working that day, and he worked for Island Creek Coal at Kelly. And I remember him telling Mom in a loud voice, you need to get the kids ready to go.
And there was some kids, some of us kids up in the living room watching cartoons. And Mom was in the kitchen fixing breakfast. She heard cars honking the horns, blowing the horns going down Buffalo Creek.
My grandparents lived down at Latrobe, and my sister, she's 3 years older than me, she had spent the night with them. And I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly how they got warning that the water was coming.
We woke up and Mom was moving a little slow, you know, because she didn't know what was going on. And Dad said, come here and look.
And she went to the kitchen window to see what was going on, and she said it was like a swell of water that was being pushed by the big water. And that swell of water had already started leaving the banks of Buffalo Creek, and she saw the roof of a house in that water, and what she saw was she thought she saw a man holding on to the roof of that house. And so she screamed for Dad. My mom was raised in Saunders, West Virginia, which was the community right below the dam, so she knew the dangers of that dam growing up. And so she knew, when she saw what she saw, she knew that the dam had broke.
And he was showing her the water had already started coming into the yard. We lived at Raleigh, which is about the middle of Buffalo Creek, right above Fanco Loadout. And we, she came, got the kids. There was 3 of us, me, my younger brother, my older brother, and said, get dressed now.
By the time she had got us up and everybody was getting ready to go, it had already broken and the water was already coming down the street.
My uncle, he packed my sister, and I think they had to wade through water to get up to the mountain and get clear, but it completely destroyed my grandparents' house.
We got dressed and got our clothes on, half asleep, and we come out, and it was probably about a foot deep in the yard at that time. Water was. It was black, cold. Of course, it was over our boots.
And I can remember my uncle coming and knocking on the door, telling Dad that the dam at Buffalo had broke, and he was going to go over. He worked for Amherst Coal Company, and he was worked at the tipple, but he was an operator of some of the heavy equipment, so he was going to go over to see what he could do.
There was a bang on our back door, and my dad had answered the back door, and it was the older brother of the younger Jude boy that spent the night with us, and he was frantic, telling my dad that my brother has to come home. Dad said he has to come home now. And so my dad got the younger boy together, and they went off to home, while my mother started gathering the younger kids to get their coats on and shoes on. And then there was another bang at the door, and it was the older Jude boy. He came all the way back to tell us that the dam had broke.
A wall of water 20 to 30 feet tall smashed into the community of Saunders. About 50 people lived there. A dozen homes were washed away, leaving little evidence where they once stood. Eyewitnesses there reported it took a little less than 15 minutes for the entire contents of Dam Number 3, 132 million gallons of water, sludge, and rock, to empty into Buffalo Creek. Saunders was the uppermost of the 17 communities along Buffalo Creek, and the first to feel the deadly force of the water. Between Saunders and Pardee, about a mile below the refuse pile, the valley floor was scoured out to a depth of 5 feet, destroying the road and sections of the railroad track and leaving behind 6 million cubic feet of flood-transported rock, refuse, and sludge. You can see the high water mark on the side of the valley wall. And then downstream through Laredo, through Cranco, Lundale, and Stowe, through Kreitz, Latrobe, and Robinette. Amherstdale, Becko, Fanco, Riley, Brayholme, Acoville, Crown, and Kistler, leaving a path of death, destruction, and devastation.